There comes a time in the history of nations when fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged. At the very least, we should debate. We should debate whether or not we are going to relinquish our rights or whether or not we are going to have a full and able debate over whether or not we can live within the Constitution or whether or not we have to go around the Constitution. Justice Brandeis wrote that the right to be left alone is the most cherished of rights, most prized among civilized men. The Fourth Amendment incorporates this right to privacy. The Fourth Amendment incorporates this right to be left alone. Dozens of programs the government has instituted to look at your stuff. There's another group called EPIC, Electronic Privacy Information Center, and they talk about suspicious activity reports. These are reports that your bank has to file whenever you deal in cash at the bank. There's certain dollar limits. And they think, well, gosh, someone is probably a bad person if they're putting $9,500 in cash in the bank. Well, it turns out a lot of honest, law-abiding people do that. Not too long ago, there was a Korean husband and wife. They owned a grocery store. They dealt in a lot of cash, and they were very successful, and they deposited 3 times a day over $9,000, $8,000 to $10,000. They tried to stay under $10,000 because there was all kinds of extra paperwork if you were over $10,000. And so what the government said is, oh, you're structuring your deposits to evade the people. You must be guilty of something. The government then can accuse people of a crime and take their stuff. There's something called civil asset forfeiture. It doesn't require that you be convicted. It doesn't even require that you be accused of something. There was a story not too long ago in Philadelphia, Christos Saravelos, and the teenager was selling drugs out of the back of the parents' house. So they caught the kid, and they were punishing him, but they decided they'd punish the parents too. So they confiscated the parents' house, evicted the family. So teenager makes a mistake selling drugs. What does the government do? They take the parents' house. You think that's going to help the kid or help anybody get better in this situation by taking the house? But here's the rub. Kid didn't even have to be convicted of anything. The kid didn't own the house. He was just their kid. If we allow all kinds of data to be out there to catch people, and then we're not even going to require that you're convicted of a crime before we take your stuff, you can see the danger of allowing so much data to be collected. But we are currently convicting and taking people's stuff or their money simply based on what they're using it for. The Washington Post did a series of articles on this. Turns out that most people having their stuff taken are poor, often African American, often Hispanic, but for the most part, poor. One guy was here in Washington, had $10,000, and he was going to buy equipment like a refrigerator or a commercial oven or something for his restaurant. They just stopped him and took his money. It took him years to get it back, and he only got it back because the Institute for Justice defended him in getting it back. But it turns justice on its head because he was basically considered to be guilty until he could prove himself innocent. Realize then that people like this are sometimes being picked up because of something called suspicious activity reports. Suspicious activity reports make your bank into a policeman or a policewoman. When you deposit things, they are obligated to report you to the police, to the government. Does it sound something like 1984? Does it sound like when you have informants out there everywhere, see something, say something, that your banker is going to call the government if you put cash into the bank?
Since 2005, the IRS has grabbed more than $240 million from bank accounts. Some of the owners are entirely innocent of any crime. How do they do this? Through civil forfeiture and structuring. Civil forfeiture gives government the power to take property suspected of involvement in a crime, even if the owner hasn't been charged with a crime. Structuring is when a person deposits or withdraws money below $10,000 to evade a federal law that requires banks to report transactions larger than $10,000. It was originally used to fight organized crime and money laundering, but increasingly, people who are not structuring and are entirely innocent of any crime are caught in the IRS's structuring forfeiture net. Here are a few facts from the report. From 2005 to 2012, the IRS seized more than $240 million from suspected structuring violations in more than 2,500 cases. Structuring-related seizures are growing more frequent. In 2012, the IRS initiated more than 5 times as many such seizures as it did in 2005, yielding a 166% increase in forfeiture revenue. At least a third of the IRS's structuring-related seizures arose out of nothing more than a series of transactions under $10,000 with no other criminal activity alleged by the government. People whose money is seized usually face a long legal battle to win it back, if they get it back. The average forfeiture for suspected structuring took nearly a year to complete. For even more information, check out our report.
My name is Sandy Thomas. My dad and I run a small grocery store in Michigan. My dad's owned the store since 1978, and we employ about 30 people. This is my dad, Terry.
This is Shaw's Market. It's my store. I'm here 7 days a week. I love my job, and I love my customer.
Earlier this year, the government came in and took all the money from our store's bank account. They called it civil forfeiture.
Federal forfeiture law allows the government to take your entire bank account just because it doesn't like the way you deposit or withdraw your money.
The government hasn't charged the Decos with any crime, and they've broken no law.
We didn't do anything wrong.
Federal law requires banks to report cash transactions above $10,000. It's illegal to try to avoid that requirement. In this case, the government claims Terry and Sandy broke the law by frequently depositing less than $10,000 into their store's bank account.
But the government never bothered to ask why they did that. You know what they would have found out if they had asked?
This is insurance policy. It's only covered $10,000 in cash.
Last year alone, the government took in more than $4 billion in forfeiture money. Taking money from innocent people like Terry and Sandy is wrong.
That's why we teamed up with the Institute for Justice to protect the rights of all Americans against civil forfeiture.
What is the IRS trying to do with the Bank Secrecy Act?
Increasingly, the IRS is using civil forfeiture laws and the Bank Secrecy Act to take the bank accounts of small businesses, legitimate small businesses, just because the government suspects that they deposited their money in an unlawful way or wrong.
Okay, so the Bank Secrecy Act triggers certain reports if business people or individuals deposit $10,000 or more into an account. People who are criminals, I assume, want to avoid triggering that paperwork specifically so that they can keep their illegal activities under wraps. But by virtue of the fact that there's a lot of paperwork that's being generated, some legitimate business people say, well, I just don't want to cause all that paperwork. And that seems to be the case with one of your clients.
You've got it right. Federal banking laws require banks to file reports with the Treasury when you make cash transactions of more than $10,000. If you deposit less than that, it's legal if you have a legitimate business purpose for doing so. But if you're depositing less than $10,000 for the purpose of avoiding those bank reports that are mandated by federal law, that's something called structuring. You're structuring your cash transactions to avoid the reports. And that's the way the IRS is taking money from Carol Hinders, our client in Spirit Lake, Iowa, and from Jeff Hirsch and his brothers, our client on Long Island. the IRS alleged that they deposited their money wrong. They simply looked at their bank statements and said, you've got a lot of under $10,000 deposits. Grab that money without any serious investigation.
So the IRS sees a pattern of deposits that they determine, to use their words, is consistent with structuring, which of course doesn't mean that it is. They use that to then seize whole bank accounts based on, as you say, very little investigation. And then it becomes, if the people want their money back, it turns into a civil proceeding where a preponderance of evidence should prevail, and they have to fight to get this money back. It seems like there are a lot of sort of quantum leaps there that the government is making in order to keep these people's money.
That's right. Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. Civil forfeiture law has become one of the most dangerous assaults to private property in the nation because it's so easy for the government to take your property based on a mere suspicion, and then it's so hard for you to get your money back. There's this terrible direct financial incentive in civil forfeiture where the agencies that seize your money then can use that money to pad their own budgets. So it fosters an abuse of these laws as well. You have these three problems. It's easy for them to take your money, hard for you to get it back. They're encouraged to take as much as possible. That's capturing innocent people under these civil forfeiture laws. Structuring is just one aspect of that.
Now, the case that you have in New York, the government seized hundreds of thousands of dollars from these business people. That sounds like quite a bit of wealth to be seizing, and these guys are dealing with products that, quite frankly, are often associated with criminal activity.
Well, the government took $450,000 from the Hirsch family, Jeff Mitchell and his brother Richard. For 27 years, they've run bi-county distributors. They distribute candy, snacks, and cigarettes to convenience stores all around Long Island. It's a small business, a family business. They wake up early every morning, drive a delivery van, deliver these goods. They are not a wealthy family. It's a very modest business. Cigarettes and other convenience store goods have a pretty small margin. So they have a high volume, low profits. And what the government seized was money that they largely owed to other people, owed to their vendors. And it has completely upended their business. And they've survived these 2.5 years since the seizure because on the basis of their exceptional reputation, vendors have just loaned them money to stay in business.
For local law enforcement agencies, when they want to execute a big seizure and they have a state law that conflicts with the agency keeping that money, they will sometimes bring in a federal agency to technically execute the seizure, and then the federal government then can kick back a huge share of that money to the local agency. In this case, this is the IRS seizing large amounts of money. Where does that money go? And is it directly benefiting the programs that the IRS has, like this one?
The program you're talking about is a program called equitable sharing. And what that allows local and state law enforcement officers to do is seize money, cooperate with federal prosecutors, have the federal government take that money, keep it under lax federal civil forfeiture laws, and then kick back up to 80% to the local law enforcement agencies. It's a huge incentive for local and state law enforcement officers to fill holes in their local budgets with federal largesse, lax federal civil forfeiture laws that allow them to keep that money. That actually is a part of the Long Island story. In this case, the Nassau County Police Department seized the money, cooperated with the IRS as part of a task force. The IRS is now prosecuting this. But if the IRS succeeds in taking that money, the money will go both to the IRS and to the local law enforcement agencies. In Iowa, the money will all stay with the U.S. Treasury Department, who will send that money to the IRS and other agencies that seize the money under federal law.
Who is Carol Hinders? She's one of your clients, but who is she?
Carol Hinders has run Mrs. Lady's Mexican Food, Mexican restaurant in Spirit Lake, Iowa, for 38 years. She founded the company with her mother, ran it together for about 30 years, and for the last 8, she's been on her own. She works 6 days a week serving customers. It's an all-cash business. She doesn't accept credit cards. That's part of the reason why she makes so many cash deposits. that appears to be why the IRS caught her on their radar and without so much as a serious investigation, grabbed her entire bank account.
The IRS has announced that they will be making some changes to how they do these kinds of seizures, but that doesn't change the authority that these laws afford that agency.
That's right. Regardless of whatever change has been announced, the law still makes structuring a crime. And the law still makes it very difficult for innocent people to avoid being caught in this web of laws. So Congress or judges really have to step in here and say civil forfeiture cannot be used to take property from innocent people. Moreover, when that property is taken, under civil forfeiture laws, you don't get a prompt hearing before a judge to contest the seizure. That has to change.
Henry Hyde wrote a book for the Cato Institute years ago called Forfeiting Our Property Rights, I believe, and there was some reform in 2000. Where does that stand now, and what are the specific steps that you suggest the Congress take?
That's right. The Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act was in 2000. One of the most sweeping parts of that law was an attempt to curb the abuse of forfeitures like the one in Long Island, where the government seizes your money and then sits on it for years before bringing it before a judge. And you're just helpless, being coerced into a settlement or without your money, perhaps even going out of business. The Forfeiture Act attempted to solve that problem. Unfortunately, for years, prosecutors have been undermining that reform. In Long Island, they're simply violating that law. They were obligated to give notice of the forfeiture within 60 days, file a complaint within 90 days. They blew all of those deadlines, have just been sitting on the money. One important reform is whether it comes from Congress or from a judge. Every person who has their property seized by the government should be before a judge, a neutral adjudicator, to contest the seizure very promptly. That doesn't happen now, and it must happen to comply with the Constitution.
Now, Kent Hovind is a true American political prisoner. He's been trying to call in from a federal prison. And I don't want to name the federal prison because they'll run in and start harassing him right away. It'll take the bureaucrats a while to figure out where he's at and try to stop the interview. I mean, it's a legal interview, but we've had him try to stop these before. Kent, when they were indicting him a decade ago or more, was on with us. Creation speaker Dr. Kent Hovind has spent already a decade in federal prison, charged up to 100 years for mail fraud. And you look at what he did, it was nothing. He was a science teacher for 15 years, began a full-time creation ministry, became very successful. He debated more than 100 scientists concerning evolution versus creation and created the well-known 7-part video creation series translated in 32 languages. He reached over 1 billion people. He had a very popular theme park that was 501c3, which there's a lot of other Christian theme parks. You're allowed to have that. But you notice you've had thousands, over 10,000 501c3s denied to Christian charities the last 6 years. The number's more like 15,000, but the oldest number is about 10. And more than 10,000 groups audited or indicted. Mainline conservative groups, pro-gun groups, pro-life groups, pro-veteran groups. Anything right of Mao Zedong, basically. But Kent Hovind was charismatic, nice, friendly, great guy. I didn't particularly agree with his brand of creationism. I already talked about that. Doesn't matter. I don't think men's interpretation of the Bible or these transhumanist eugenicists and Darwin's view and social Darwinism, I don't agree with that as well. There's clear jumps in all this and manipulations, and we're not being given the truth. I mean, the evolutionists have been caught in so many Piltdown Man and other frauds, but I'm not going to debate all that. The age of the earth, any of that. I've read the Bible. I have my own interpretation. And it's wild. And the globalists believe something similar, but from their perspective. So they don't even believe, all the top genetic engineers people, they believe in transpermia and panspermia and off-world seeding. They don't believe this. But the point is, even if you disagree with Kent Hovind, why is he in prison with 2020 specials about the incredible fraud? He said dinosaurs were around during Noah's time and Adam and Eve before that. What a kook. And he doesn't pay taxes and he's going to prison. You can go start any church you want and get 501c3. You could teach that Ronald McDonald is the savior. You can teach whatever you want. That's called religious freedom, the First Amendment. But see, he went to prison. He's been set up, so now everybody else is fair game. Who was the minister in Nazi Germany? First they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't one. Then they came for this group. And finally, when they came for me, there was nobody else left to speak. Now, joining us first, and he'll probably ride shotgun with us into Kent being on with us, Mark Adams has been on before. He's writing a book on Congressman Hansen, who I interviewed many years ago. He's sick right now and can't come on. He was indicted multiple times, found not guilty, so they kept arresting him and then driving him around in a truck for months called dieseling until his feet burst. They tortured him in holding cells, you name it, because he was trying to abolish the IRS. You say, why don't more congressmen do that? Because they'll grab you and torture the hell out of you. Federal marshals will. Mark Adams has been fighting for Kent Hovind as well and has the documents and the history. So, Mark, this is about everybody here. But, I mean, such a good, loving, Christian, well-spoken, charismatic, charming guy. I love the fact he's challenging this official religion of Darwinism and evolution as it's taught is just totally false, been proven false. But regardless, even if Kent Hovind was wrong, he has a First Amendment and a right to be a Christian that teaches his faith, just like Muslims have a right to, their faith. But there's a war on Christians. But let's get into his case for folks that don't know about it right now. Mark Adams.
Well, Alex, it was in 2006 when a jackbooted commie Nazi government Gestapo goon squad arrested Pastor Kent Hovind and his wife Jo at gunpoint inside their home in the dark of night. And then later on that year, Pastor Hovind was convicted on a 58-count indictment. Now, 45 of those counts had to do with so-called structuring. That is, Dr. Hovind was withdrawing money from his bank account in order to fund the needs of his ministry. And for these withdrawals, they were typically more than $5,000, but less than $10,000. And because he was doing that, the government was pursuing him as if he was part of a drug cartel or a terrorist organization.
A guy with no criminal record, a school teacher who had a successful ministry in a theme park, and we just put on screen the New York Times. Let's put it on screen. The headline, Law Lets IRS Seize Accounts on Suspicion, No Crime Reported, that talks about old ladies with tiny businesses. I mean, I pull out cash all the time to give bonuses to people at Christmas and stuff. I mean, I give $300 to employees. It's like $10,000, $15,000 to get all that out. That's not structuring. That's after-tax money. But this is how they use the, quote, rules, not the law, in a reign of terror. Go ahead.
Exactly. The IRS has a reputation of ruthlessly using these so-called structuring laws to terrorize innocent citizens. There was hearings about this last month, and the upshot of it is that the IRS would try to curtail.
They said, we're going to stop
activity.
doing it and cut it back, and we're sorry for 34,000 innocent people having their lives ruined, or people we threw in prison for no reason, and all our fake juries and the rest of it, because they even go further. But it's just like the ATF last week saying, we won't ban your bullets. They're back this week. And this is a criminal operation.
Indeed. And in fact, if you look into the court case itself, it gets even worse. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld his conviction on all of the 45 so-called structuring charges. But in 2013, the 11th Circuit overturned a guilty verdict on a separate case. This was U.S. versus Lang, a separate case of structuring. They overturned the verdict because of the way the federal prosecutors mishandled the case.
And there were clearly orders to go and get him because he was articulate, good-looking, reaching over 1 billion people with his ministry. He was incredibly successful, and so that's why they came after him.
Indeed. And now, and like I said, the bulk of the charges are these so-called structuring charges. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the conviction, but then a little more than a year later, when the same kind of case came before them, they overturned the conviction on this guy, Mr. Lang, because of the way the federal prosecutors mishandled his case. But the procedures that the prosecutors used on Mr. Lang were exactly the same procedures that they used on Kevin Hovent, but yet they will not apply that ruling retroactively to Pastor Kant's case. So, in other words, they overturned the structuring charges against Lang, but even though the same kind of prosecutor misconduct was being applied in Pastor Kent Hovland's case, they will not use that precedent to overturn his verdict.
Unbelievable.
That was in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and that was in 2013.
And we're going to skip this network break because this is so important. If they can get him, they can get anybody. And instead of cowering in fear, this agency needs to be abolished. We need to go back to the taxing system we had previous to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and the subsequent income tax. It is such a scam, but he still languishes in prison, even though the New York Times admits this is a criminal fraud, their interpretation of the law, used to persecute innocent people and anyone, including folks that pull cash out of ATMs. You know, deposit your money, pull cash out, you are a criminal. No, using cash is not illegal. Using cash is not a crime. I've been doing it for a long time. I also use credit cards and stuff, but if it's private stuff I'm doing and not a company function, then I pay for a lot of stuff in cash. And I give tips in cash. And people I'm trying to keep cash alive. Everybody knows that. That's not a crime. Well, under their system, they could doll up and dummy up this stuff on me. Well, go ahead and try it, crooks. Because we're sick of you, and we're sick of your criminal activity, and we're sick of the fact that all these Democrats and some Republicans and Al Sharpton, Al Sharpton owns $5 million of taxes and doesn't have to pay them. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting how they selectively use the IRS to persecute people and to shut down this person's ministry. It is just amazing. Obviously, the orders came down to persecute him. This happened under Bush, but it continues under Obama, and now it's expanded. Continue, Mark Adams, breaking down the case and how he's doing in prison.
Indeed. Now, you mentioned Al Sharpton. He owes over $1 million in taxes.
And the numbers I've seen are between 4 and 6.
Yes. And then let's not forget Charlie Rangel, Congressman Charlie Rangel. He has a whole pattern of tax evasion, special treatment, and enrichment that seems to increase with his power and prestige in Congress. There was an article exposing him on the New York Post a few years ago. Then let's not forget former Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. Big headlines in Forbes magazine. Geithner's tax troubles are serious, yet he goes on to become the Secretary of the Treasury. Another disturbing aspect. During the trial, I'm referring to his first trial, Kent Hovind explained how an IRS agent, Scott Schneider, he was a witness for the government, he sat at the prosecutor's table for the duration of the trial, even though he's a government witness. Witnesses are not supposed to be in the courtroom. And during that interview, Pastor Hovind explained he was concerned how the presence of an IRS agent, might intimidate the jury. Well, this reminded me.
Let's go forward. We're putting the document on screen. They had FBI agents on the jury.
Now, this is
on the grand jury.
Case. This is a separate case, Alex. This is from 1981.
No, I'm talking about that case. Yeah.
Yes, but what you see here is U.S. Attorney Harold Edwards is writing a letter to the IRS District Director, Woodrow Malone, and you see right on page 2, Edwards is stating how agents of the FBI will be seated on the grand jury. So this gives you some insight as to the lengths that our government will go through to persecute a targeted victim.
That's right. They target who they want, then they put government agents in these federal juries, grand juries, and then juries as well. That's why they have a 96 to 97% federal conviction rate, because it's totally fake.
Well, no, indeed. And in fact, one of the government misconduct in federal judiciary that was discovered by Congressman George Hansen, he disclosed how U.S. attorneys were obtaining confidential tax records on jurors without that person's knowledge or consent. So that's been going on for a long time.
Well, let's not forget what I told folks a decade ago that was declassified last year. For decades, they've used the NSA, the DEA has, to create fake cases with fake spy data without warrants, and they create fake cases for the court, do mock trials and even fake evidence, and then the judges even know, and they go in and stage the whole thing.
The Edgar Steele case is very typical of that.
Of course, loving government, run by the actual drug dealers.
Indeed. Also, there's another one. Dr. French Anderson is sitting in prison right now. He has evidence, and this is not the federal government, this is the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department that framed him. He now has evidence that the recordings they used in court were totally fabricated, yet he could not get the courts to overturn his case.
Well, all I know is Kent Hovind was incredibly successful, and they got him on wire fraud, and they always seem to use that. Or the FBI comes to visit you and then asks you a bunch of questions, then you get something a little bit wrong. They claim lying to a federal agent. The answer is never talk to them. Talk to the hand. That is the answer. Do not talk to them one bit. And then the only way they've defeated EPA and FDA lawyers harassing companies is you then have to start investigating and doing lawsuits against the judges themselves and start doing corruption investigations on the judges. And it's the only way they back off. I mean, the government, and I've talked to top national lawyers on air. I've talked to the top lawyer who sues the FDA, always trying to ban vitamins. And the only way to shut them down is you start basically investigating the judge. It's the only thing these mobsters understand. And boy, when you start investigating them, it is incredible. I got to say, state judges aren't that corrupt on average compared to the feds. And I'm not defending the states either. They have their own problems. But people who look to the feds to come in and fix things, that's like asking Satan to come in and, make Slimer behave or something. You know, a little lower demon, it's kind of mindless running around, engaged in mischief compared to the mastermind Satan himself. What else we need to know, Mark Adams, about the Kent Hovind case?
Yes, we have some information about the judge, U.S. District Judge Margaret Rogers. I'm going back now to the first trial when he was sentenced by her, and she said to him that his crimes were worse than that of a rapist. Now, during a telephone interview from Kent Hovind, he named Baptist minister Dr. Greg Dixon as one of the witnesses who heard Judge Rogers make that outrageous remark. And I spoke with Dr. Dixon, and he affirmed me, yes, he heard the judge say that. He also executed a signed affidavit stating that. Several other people also submitted sworn affidavits. The reason why they took that course of action is when Kent Hovind finally got the court transcripts, those words did not appear in the official transcripts. Yet even though they have witnesses who have submitted affidavits, no investigation was launched as to why those words are missing of official court transcripts.
Please continue breaking it down.
Okay, now, again, Judge Rogers. In 2009, Judge Rogers cited 2 school teachers for contempt. for silently praying before lunch.
Oh.
Afterwards, 50 congressmen issued a letter supporting the teachers. One of them, Representative Jeff Miller, said, "A federal judge has gone well outside the bounds of the Constitution to declare that prayer offered among adults is illegal." And that is from the Washington Times.
That's right. We've got it on screen. That was just recently. And for those that don't understand this, in Texas, there was a case. There's been a bunch of these just last year where a little, I think it was an 8-year-old girl, brought her little picture Bible, Sunday school Bible, in her bag, and they took it away from her and tried to suspend her as if you couldn't have a Bible in the school. She could have whatever book she wanted. You could have a Harry Potter book, but not the Bible. It is a war on Christians. Are we going to put up with it? Yeah, most churches are scared to death getting in line. That's what this intimidation was about, and that will let the evil take over. You got to stand up to it and say no, and that's starting to happen. All right, we have Kent Hovind on the line. He's talking to Nico right now. We're going to put him on the board and go to him as soon as they're ready. He is a political prisoner, and he'll only have 15 minutes on the line with us. We're going to go to Kent Hovind right now. Political prisoner, more than a decade in prison, indicted under structuring that the New York Times will put on screen. Last year admitted is a total criminal fraud. Hearings last month in Congress admitting it's incredible. You simply take money out of your own bank account as cash, and they claim that you're trying to steal money and launder it, and then they put a preacher who reached over 1 billion people in 30-plus languages, exposing the myth of modern Darwinism as a socialist religion. And the left loves the fact he's in prison. They have all these shows about it, and now they're targeting Christians by the tens of thousands with the IRS. If we don't get past the fear and stand up against them, they're going to come for everybody. Mr. Hovind, you're a hero for the First Amendment, and you're a hero for alternative history, and it's not illegal to do that, but evidently in your case it is. You're a political prisoner. We know we've only got about 12 minutes left with you, so you've got the floor.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It's an honor. I've loved your program for years. Yes, I certainly feel like a POW, prisoner of war. In case folks haven't followed it, there's a whole lot of tons of information on 2Peter3.com, just the number 2, the word Peter, and the number 3 for 2 Peter 3 in the Bible. To summarize quickly, I was a high school science and math teacher for 15 years. I moved to Pensacola in 1989, became an evangelist traveling the world speaking on the subject of creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. And I was targeted very early by the IRS, the early 90s. I tried everything to find out, what do you want? I answered their letters. They never answered mine. Finally, they came with a SWAT team and threw everybody off the property, held my wife hostage for 17 hours, made her open the church safe, took all the money out of there. It's just a long, sad story, and everything is up on 2 Peter 3, and we have tried everything. So finally in 2006, they came with another SWAT team, arrested my wife and I. No warning, no nothing. We have always answered their letters. They have never done anything illegal. And they arrested us for structuring. My wife had just gotten to sleep, and they took her down to the courthouse in her nightgown, wouldn't let her put a robe on, wouldn't let her get dressed, wouldn't let her go to the bathroom. She's 5 feet tall, little grandma, just amazing, piano teacher. So the charge was structuring, which I'd never heard of. They said, well, yeah, you took your own money out of the bank. Actually, it was ministry money out of the ministry bank account to pay ministry bills back in 2002, 2003, and 2004. Okay, no, we stopped in 2003. Okay, so that's illegal? Well, yeah, you did it in amounts less than $10,000. Oh, so we took it to trial. I thought you're supposed to when you're innocent. There's no crime here at all. After the government putting on their dog and pony show, my attorney said, don't even give a defense. Everybody can see you did not commit a crime. The law says you have to have 2 or more transactions in one day. Each transaction is under $10,000, but those 2 total over $10,000. Okay, well, ours was 1 transaction every 12 days. Not a crime at all. But then they said, nope, that's structuring. over those years you withdrew $430,000 of ministry money to pay ministry bills. Okay. And so we did not even give a defense. At the end of trial, the judge changed the jury instructions and said, if you find they took out less than $10,000, you must find them guilty.
So he changed the law under judicial tyranny right there on the spot.
Well, yes, a woman judge, Judge Casey Rogers. I think that was wrong to change the law. And so the jury, of course, found us guilty. Well, yeah, they took out less than $10,000. Go to the bank, take out $10. That's less than $10,000. So guilty. Then the judge said, now all that money that was withdrawn, even though you stopped doing this 3 years ago, all that money that was withdrawn over those years, you now owe it to the government. They're going to seize that money. Well, I don't own anything. I live in a church parsonage. I drive a church van. I don't own anything. So they put in a motion saying, we want to seize the church ministry property. Of course, the church trustees said, objection. Why don't you go seize Walmart? They got more money. Why don't you go seize something else? No. They want to seize the church ministry property to pay these structured funds when there's no crime at all involved ever.
And, sir, in the time we have with you, we know you're totally innocent. The New York Times, they had hearings last month that the law says $10,000. They're going after 86-year-old women with no criminal record who run tiny diners that seat 10 people who would make cash deposits every day of less than $1,000 and then would write checks on that. They call depositing it structuring and money laundering. So they do whatever they want outside of law. It's all admitted. You should be released. They've overturned other cases like yours. Here's the big question. Why did they target you? Obviously to shut you down. What do you think of the massive persecution of the church now? It's meant to intimidate the church into submitting, going under government faith-based initiative, in my view. Give us your take on that. And then B, how do we free Kent Hovind?
Well, yes, there are plenty of websites, freekenthovind.com. It's H-O-V-I-N-D, Norwegian name, Hovind. Congress needs to repeal that stupid structuring law. They need to get a lot of pressure to say, look, would you IRS apologize for misusing it? Well, that's step one, but that's nowhere close to enough. Get Congress to repeal the stupid law and, very important, make it retroactive. And say, okay, anybody ever arrested under this stupid law is hereby released, and all money taken from them is hereby returned, and they get $1 million for every year false incarceration.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
I've been locked up over 100 months away from my family. I've been moved 23 times all over the country, diesel therapy, trying to shut me up. I am an outspoken Christian. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. And with my science background, I've done 100 debates against atheists, and I slaughter them sweetly in Christian love. So they just hate me for just teaching the truth. And there are thousands of anti-Hovind websites.
They are totalitarian scum. This just proves it. They're the opposite of liberals. And your case, you're such a gentleman. You're so sweet. You reached 1 billion people. You were a superstar who was very humble. You just come across as a total Boy Scout. And they are to see an innocent man persecuted like this makes me sick. And these churches have been intimidated by this type of stuff to submit to the government now and even teach what the government says. It is disgusting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
To make it even worse, a year ago, I filed a perfectly legitimate lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons for keeping my legal box and hindering me from filing my motions. And I filed a perfectly lawful lis pendens, a litigation pending, which says, hey, because they wanted to sell the church property. They did. They already did.
And now they're coming after you for pro se activity. Tell folks about that.
Yeah, they wanted to. I just finished trial last Friday. They came after me again, a 2-week trial, saying, you face another 100 years in prison for filing this lis pendens and for contempt of court, which is insane. The jury was a hung jury on every count except for one. They did find me guilty of contempt of court of a 2007 order, and my attorney is putting in a motion saying, look, there was no law on that. That one may
Will you ever get out of prison? It's incredible. How long have you been in prison? How long will they keep you? They just keep trying to pile it up. What happened in the new court case?
Well, the new court case, it was a hung jury on everything except one count when I was found guilty of and that one carries anywhere from nothing to, there's no limit, 100 years, I suppose. Contempt of court, which, what on earth is that? So we're working now to get that jury verdict overturned. who knows? I was supposed to go home last month from this last charge, but I've been sitting in a county jail with 11 guys sleeping on the floor, and for 10 months now. I've been in county jail.
I had Michael Allison on a few years ago. He was facing life in prison for filming the police and taping the police on his own property, and the state actually tried to get him life in prison for that. I mean, this is totalitarianism, is it not?
It is indeed, and Edmund Burke said all that's needed for evil men to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And this is America, for heaven's sake. We've got freedom. We need to take advantage of the freedoms and use it. Right now, Congress can change all this. Congress created this club that they're clubbing everybody with. Take it away. Congress should pass a law that says no one involved in law enforcement at any level, judges, lawyers, etc., should be allowed to own stock in the prison system.
That's
they
right.
profit. It's double dipping. The longer they lock you away, the more money they make. I wrote a book about this under a different name called The Kennel. It's up on Lulu.com and on 2Peter3.com. It exposes the evil. All I do, like Jeremiah the prophet, is just simply expose the truth. Here's what's happening, and boy, they hate the light. Evil men hate the light.
Well, you're a very righteous man. I mean, people can pick up on that. You're just a straightforward Jimmy Stewart, type guy. That's how you come off. They cannot stand you because you are a leader, Kent, and you're a hero. It hurts my heart though to think about how they've tortured you and dieseled you. Tell folks what they've done to you.
Well, like I said, I've been moved 23 times. I was moved to Colorado. I live in Pensacola, Florida. You're supposed to stay within 500 miles of your home. Well, I was moved out to Colorado against my will, and then moved up to New Hampshire against my will. I was moved on to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery. It's only there 4 days, and they took me out, never told me why, put me in county jail. It's been, diesel therapy. But God's been good. I've written 37 books. I've led over 700 men to Christ. Half the Bible is written from prison or by people who've been in captivity or prison. So God uses it. It's coming to everybody. If you stand true for the Lord, it's coming. So just get ready for it. It's been a blessing in 1,000 ways. It's been hard. I have an 8-year-old grandson that I've never held in freedom, never. He was born 2 months after I came to prison. I should have gone home last month. I could go home today if they overturned this one count. But
this call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, I love the Lord. I love my country. I'm trying to help. And I think all the stuff we have posted on 2 Peter 3 would help. The thing they fear the most is light. And all Gideon had in the book of Judges was 2 weapons, light and noise. Shine the light, make a lot of noise, and the enemy started fighting each other. That's what I'm praying here. The IRS agents in my case need to be completely investigated, start to finish. The judges need to be completely investigated. If they did nothing wrong, okay. But Congress impeaches judges if they don't rule according to good behavior. They rarely do that. But the Constitution says they're appointed for life during good behavior. Okay, well, check the case out.
Well, Kent, I get tears in my eyes, not so much for you, but for all the other innocents they're persecuting, for the unborn, for the fact of how they don't have death lists for our veterans of do not treat and nobody gets in trouble. The evil is intensifying. Is our country beginning to come under judgment?
I fear it is, brother. If any country ever deserved the judgment of God, it's America. We had a wonderful founding, amazing blessings from God, and we have spit in his face, and we've done so many things against his law that I fear. Well, the Bible says, for the transgression of the land, many are the princes thereof. Because we're wicked, we've got this huge bureaucracy. So God's giving us what we deserve, and it's sad. So I appreciate what you guys do to try to turn it around. I'm in the same boat. I think righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. All I've ever tried to do for 46 years is win souls and tell people live for God.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
You have 60 seconds, Kent, there from your political prison. You've got 60 seconds. Final words.
Okay, what people can do is deluge Congress. Now, this judge had said, please write to me and let me know what you think about Kent Hovind should this, on this one count he was found guilty of. I don't know that it'll make any difference, but Judge Casey Rogers, number 1, North Palafox, Palafox in Pensacola, 32501. and just say, Judge Rogers, please, let Kent go home. It's been 100 months. Just go home. We still think we're going to win the case. We can always go on appeal, but Congress needs to stop some of these stupid laws. They need to simply abolish the IRS. What do we need them for? Just shut them down. We didn't have them until 1933. Just stop. Okay? But if not, at least investigate them. Look what they did in my case. Classic example of everything going wrong with our justice system.
And there you go. He's now back sleeping on the floor in a giant mass of stinking inmates. And I don't say they're stinking people. You just know it stinks in there. And a guy with no criminal record, school teacher, did nothing wrong. And the so-called left, it's why I detest them. They are the opposite of a liberal, the opposite of Thomas Jefferson, the opposite of freedom. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's how the First Amendment begins. And you've got a preacher who was successful, who they feared, who was getting really big, and he wasn't even making a lot of money. He took $400,000 out for the entire ministry over 2 years. Folks, he had films that were selling millions of copies. He was airing them for free all over the world. He had different groups giving them out free. He wasn't charging, in many cases, books for children. It's the First Amendment, and the left didn't like it as they put him in prison. They'll put everybody in prison. They're not playing games. Do we still have Mark Adams sitting there listening to that?
He's on the line, sir.
Mark, I mean, I literally got tears in my eyes hearing that, not so much for Kent Hovind, but it was how cheerful he was and how nice he sounded. Sounded like, Jimmy Stewart in It's a Beautiful Life or A Wonderful Life. But just to know that they're doing this now to thousands of people, and on MSNBC they brag and say, yeah, we're arresting people for their speech. We're going to shut the Tea Party down. I mean, these people are brazen, totalitarian, flaming crooks. They're not even liberals. They're dangerous. They're dangerous. Final comments on the Kent Hovind situation, Mark.
Well, Alex, you just referred to the stench of the prison complex that Dr. Hovind is subjected to. Speaking of foul stenches, one of the prosecutors in Pastor Hovind's first trial was U.S. Attorney John Atchison. He's the one who is reported to have vigorously pursued a federal indictment against Dr. Hovind. Now, Hovind was convicted in January 2007. Shortly after his conviction, the U.S. Attorney, John Atchison, assumed room temperature when he voluntarily removed himself from the gene pool. Here's what happened.
We're going to talk about it when we come back. I forgot this. The guy that went after him, this is the cult, was going to have sex with a little girl. I forgot about that. Oh, my gosh, you can't make this stuff up. We just put up the Wikipedia. We'll put up articles about it. We're going to finish up another segment with Mark Adams. It's just, it's scary, folks. And it's evil demons like that using the system. It's not even the whole system itself. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we broadcast worldwide. Tons of news. They're back with the ammo ban and more as we continue to raise the alarm for free people everywhere. In the third hour, we'll also open the phones up on any of the subjects, including Kent Hovind and what we just broke down earlier with him on air. Mark Adams is a champion and working with former Congressman Henson, who's too ill to go on air, to write a book and expose all of this. But there's hearings in Congress. This stuff is serious. The IRS admits they put innocent people in prison. They claim they're going to stop. Not until the private Federal Reserve's not running it. Not until political operatives can't do this. I had forgotten that the prosecutor in the case of Hovind and others, well, we'll get to that in a moment. It's just too incredible. John David Roy Atchison was U.S. Attorney in Florida's Northern District, assistant attorney who gained notoriety when he was arrested on suspicion of soliciting sex from a 5-year-old girl. So we'll talk about that briefly in a moment and put bookends on this. So that's the type of folks that want to put innocent preachers in jail. Boy, I feel sorry for his soul right now, let me tell you. But continuing, please support the broadcast. We stand in the face of the enemy. And I'm not whining about it. Every fiber of me wants to just fight tyranny. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of parasites and scum and evil people hurting good people. But it is your financial support that makes it all possible. And you've got a commitment from me that I will fight as hard as I possibly can and put my whole will towards warning people about the entire spectrum of evil coming down on this world. But we need you to buy the products at InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com. And I said earlier, promo code SUPER to get 10% off everything at InfoWarsStore.com. We've never done 10% off everything if memory serves. Never. I'm just doing it. 10% off, and thanks to all of you. We've never been more successful with you supporting us at InfoWarsStore.com. So why not go to the next level and fund this operation to the next level? Satellite, TV, you name it. We are months away if the support comes in. InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com at checkout. Promo code SUPER. And you get 10% off stuff already discounted like DNA Force, 30% off, or a free bottle of the Ancient Defense when you get it with the X2 Nascent Iodine. Well, there's 10% off that. 10% off already with the discounts, InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com, or 888-253-3139. But it really is epic, Mark. When you get into reality, I'd forgotten the group of scum that convicted him. Tell us in the minute or two we have left, because it's in the news, about the gentleman that was persecuting Dr. Kent Hovind, Mark Adams.
Yes, that John Atchison, the U.S. attorney. It was on September 16th, 2007, about 8 months after he railroaded Pastor Hovind to prison. He was arrested at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport. He flew to there from Georgia to solicit sex from a 5-year-old girl. And according to the news accounts, he bought her some presents. He had a doll, he had a pair of earrings, and he also had a jar of petroleum jelly in his possession.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was the next month, October 2007, he committed suicide by hanging himself in his prison cell.
And we always hear about these Homeland Security guys trying to get on planes to go have sex with kids. I mean, it's truly sick. There's a large guild of them in there, we know. And, of course, I apologize. I'm teleprompter free. I'm always fighting tyranny, so I forget things. And I apologize, everybody. Congressman Hansen died last year. I remember when he couldn't come on about 2 years ago, so you came on. I didn't know he died. So, Mark, I apologize for that. What a great man. We should have you back on soon to eulogize Mr. Hansen, Congressman Hansen.
Thank you for the airtime, Alex.
You bet. Yeah, I didn't even know that. It's just so many great men have fallen, and I'm just too busy on the front line. It's like the Alamo swinging muskets to even pay attention. So I apologize for that. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Third hour straight ahead. We'll give the number out. Your calls.
U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder today announced a major shift in how state and local police departments are permitted to seize and auction off property from those who are not convicted of a crime. Hari Srinivasan has more.
The practice by police departments is known as civil forfeiture, and it's raised nearly $3 billion for local departments around the country. But the practice has been controversial because property has been seized from people who are only suspected of a crime but not convicted. To talk more about this is Sarah Stillman, a staff writer for The New Yorker magazine. Her reporting nearly 2 years ago brought to light some of the abuses of the policy. So, Sarah, I tried to do it justice with a really tiny description, but explain civil forfeiture and what's gone wrong with it, just so we have an idea of why this is so significant today.
Well, civil forfeiture is basically a tool for law enforcement to seize people's property, their cash, their cars, other goods, and basically appropriate it if they believe that it has been used in the course of a crime. Now, the problem with it is that often that's been based on suspicion alone, so people don't actually have to be proven guilty of a crime before their property is taken. So the big news today is that Eric Holder basically announced that they were more or less ending a federal policy that had allowed local and state law enforcement agencies to take people's goods, turn them over to the federal government for forfeiture.